Hello everybody, this is Fork Poppy. Today I'm joined by Kinda MTG.
Hello.
Yeah, so we're just going to do a little bit more like podcast discussion style video today. We're going to go over some new cards from the Ninja Turtles set and then do a tier list of the meta decks, the top 50 decks in Value Vintage. So started off here with just a couple of reprints from the Precon decks. Most notable here is lands. We got a lot of Czech lands, Tango lands getting reprinted that are going to be relevant for a good amount of decks in Value Vintage. And our first main set card, Shredder's Technique. This is 3 mana, or it sneaks for 1. Sort of a feed the swarm, destroy an artifact or enchantment unconditionally, and if it was an enchantment, you lose 2 life. And I remember you were pretty high on this one, right? Kinda.
Yeah, I think just a one mana removal spell with no, exceptions like you can't hit werewolves or things like that. Just one mana, hit any creature or, enchantment too that can come up. I think that's just very strong. And then if you need to play it for 3 mana, that's still very reasonable. So I think this one's definitely something to watch out for.
Yeah, absolutely. I register Feed the Swarm regularly on my low color black decks, and there's a lot where this will be a strict upgrade. Similarly, our next sneak card, again, hard cast for 3 or sneaks for 1, and this is just a divination. Just draw 2 cards.
Yeah, 1 mana draw two is an exceptional rate. And if you can get a creature that had like an ETB, to round it out. This can get pretty crazy. And just 3 mana for draw two is not the end of the world either. If you have to hard cast it, so I think this might be my most interesting one for me in the set.
Yeah, I think so. I think this and a lot of other sneak cards, we're getting closer to having some type of a viable Ninjas deck in the format. A lot of the tools were already there. It was close, and now it might be a little closer. Then Cool But Rude. This is one that it definitely interests me personally. Right now it is $9, but it's about half of what it was a week ago. So if this price drops to anywhere close to 3, I'm gonna be really excited to try it in the Is It Looting deck in Value Vintage, where it's a good bit of inevitability. So I think this will be cool in those decks where if you're playing a longer game, if your threats keep getting removed, this can just provide that little bit of reach. One that'll almost certainly stay priced out is Super Shredder. 2 mana 1/1 menace whenever another permanent leaves the battlefield. Put a counter on it. So similar to Moonshadow from the Lorwyn set, different though. So this triggers off your opponent's permanents leaving the battlefield, which Moonshadow doesn't, and it's uncapped. It can continue to grow past 7/7, 8/8, but it doesn't trigger off things like permanents being countered or inquisitioned away.
Yeah, just being mythic I think hurts this one a lot for us, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And then Raph and Mikey Troublemakers. I think this will see play in a few format. I think it could get there in Value Vintage as well. 7 mana, 7/7 Trample Haste. Whenever it attacks, you get to flip the top of your deck until you hit a creature and put that creature in also tapped and attacking. So in a lot of your, decks that cheat out creatures, your Indomitable Creativity, notably it's green, so something like Dramatic Entrance, Through the Breach. I think it is a strict upgrade to play one copy of these in any deck that's trying to do that because it can turn your creature that almost wins on the spot into a one-hit kill.
Oath is a bit expensive in the format right now,
Hmm.
but if you have a deck with this and like one or two other fatties, there's a world where you can oath into this, attack, immediately get the other, world spine worm or something and win on the spot.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I think
Um,
those two are going to be best friends in this format.
yeah, I think it could be pretty cool.
Then we've got a whole pile of cards that are going to be good in Affinity. Krang is 6 and 2 blue, Affinity for artifacts, a 1/4 that gets buffed for each artifact you control, and when it enters, if you have less than 4, you draw up to 4 cards. I think this will be close for Modern Affinity or like an 8 cast style deck, or maybe it'll just be a hair too weak because those decks do have so many good options right now. But I think it's worth a look.
Yeah, I think this one, if it drops enough, I'll definitely be trying it in value vintage. But where I will be playing this is in normal vintage, for sure, in like a blue controlling Mishra's Workshop deck. So I'm very excited to play it there. It might be the first deck I try.
Ravenous Robots, whenever you cast an artifact, you get to make a 1/1 artifact creature token. So this is going to be really good in your go wide, cranial plating type decks. I think there's potential to have some kind of a build with like paradoxical outcome or rebuild to recast them all and have your board go even wider. I think this could see play in a lot of different formats.
Yeah, with Up the Beanstalk getting a little bit expensive now, the blue-green affinity deck Probably has some competition from the Pinnacle Emissary blue-red version. I think this one could be an interesting card.
Another good incentive to try a red splash in your affinity builds is Improvised Arsenal. It's basically a cranial plating. It's a 2 mana equipment that equips for 1 and gives the creature 1 power buff for each artifact you control. And it also has a bit of inevitability and reach built in, with the activated ability to pay 5 and make a token that's a copy of it. And right now this is sitting at $6. If it drops considerably though, I think this would be huge for affinity style decks.
Yeah, I really like this one. If you're in red, this seems like a really strong card to consider, assuming it drops a little bit.
Yeah, I've also been thinking about another reason to go red in affinity would be like potentially broadside bombardiers to sack your
Oh
seven
yeah,
drop affinity creatures, and this could play really nice with that as well.
I always forget that broadside's cheap enough for us. It's so
Yeah,
expensive in paper.
that's true. It is a little expensive still, but you could play 2, 3 copies potentially, depending on how you built the rest of your
Nice.
deck. Fugitive Droid here is kind of like a Siren Storm Tamer. It's an artifact. Just 1 blue, 1/1. You can sack it to counter a spell that targets one of your artifacts or creatures, and it has some built-in evasion, like the Kappa Cannoneer type effect. I think this could be a role player in a lot of different styles of decks, but I'm not totally sure off the top of my head where it's going to be best.
Yeah, it does. I don't either, but it does a lot of stuff for 1 mana, and I think when you
Absolutely.
do this much stuff for 1 mana, something to consider.
Definitely. And it's already only 40 cents.
Yeah, dirt cheap.
Chrome Dome could also easily see play in a go wide affinity or maybe like blue steel kind of deck. 2 mana 1/3 that gives other artifact creatures you control +1/+0, and you can pay 5 to make a temporary token of an artifact you control.
Yeah, this one I think is definitely on the fringes, but a 2 mana artifact lord for some sort of artifact or affinity deck with a neat ability there as a mana sink. I think it's one to look at if it drops, but
Yeah,
it's definitely one of the more fringe cards we've looked at.
a lot of the strength of the set is in artifacts, apparently. Next card we're going to look at is Skateboard. This is very similar to Lava Spur Boots, but it trades the ward 1 to an ETB that taps a permanent. So you can kind of look at it as like, oh, well, that pays the word for it. It taps your opponent's land down. But I think that's going to be a pretty strict upgrade to Lava Spur Boots in Legacy or Highlander or Urza Saga type of decks, where that is one of
Hmm.
your best game plans, is just put 2 constructs into play and on turn 3 have that second one be able to attack too. The fact that this can also tap down a chump blocker and just put that pressure on. I think this is going to be really good role player, one of in Urza Saga kind of decks.
Yeah, I think this one's going to be huge in Legacy for sure in the Urza Saga decks.
Another most likely Legacy is going to be the best shell card is Sewer Valence Cam. Just a 1 mana artifact, follows like the Ichor Wellspring kind of templating, where whenever it enters or leaves, this taps or untaps target creature. And it has flash and it has a mana sink to sack it and draw 2. So this has got some really interesting loops with Goblin Welder in Legacy. I think some people are trying to work with it in Engineer and Modern as well.
Yeah, I think this is going to make in Legacy some really cool Painter Servant Grindstone decks. I'm excited to see.
2 mana to put 4 creature cards that were put there from the battlefield from your graveyard into play again at instant speed. It would be
Hmm.
really interesting to try it with potentially, a Goblin Bombardment. Like thinking about my allies deck in Value Vintage that's built around bringing several creatures back from the graveyard at once to one-shot the opponent with ETBs. You could probably find something similar that uses this as the enabler. And Technodrome, also most likely not quite going to make the cut. It's a really cool card though. 2 mana, 3/3, reach trample, but it can't attack or block unless its power is 6 or more. And you can tap it to sack an artifact, draw a card, and put a counter on it. So I think this would be really cool in a hardened scale style build. Probably not actual modern hardened scales. I don't think it's quite strong enough for that. But for like a Highlander, maybe value vintage if the price drops, this would be a really cool role player.
Got some interesting abilities. It works nicely with like the mutagen cards in this set. There's a couple,
Mm-hmm.
reasonable ones if you really wanted to try for something like this.
Yeah, there's definitely no shortage of artifacts that are going to be good to sacrifice to this. Then Triceraton Commander is a pretty cool one. I know you were excited about this.
Yes. This is, another fringe one, especially for value vintage, seeing as is mythic, but it's a nice one with Luris. And it's a nice little mana sink there. If you got an extra 4 or even 6 man, you get a big army of flying dinosaurs here,
Yeah, even at
which
4 mana,
play
this
pretty
is
good.
a pretty major board swing.
Absolutely.
All right, so we're going to now get into doing our tier list for the value vintage meta. All right, starting things off, I just want to do a little disclaimer. We are working with a pretty low sample size. The value vintage meta is pretty small. There's not a lot of data, and things change every week. So this is obviously unofficial. This is just our opinion. So I wanted to start off with a slam dunk one, Nadu Breakfast, built around, of course, Nadu, banned in nearly every format besides Vintage. And I think this is, in my opinion, currently the best deck in the format.
It's had a really good string of results recently, including winning a couple of the Sunday Magic Online tournaments that the Discord holds. And I don't think it's too hard to see why. It's powered by Nadu, banned in pretty much every format, including Legacy.
It's got good results
Yeah.
online and in paper. Doesn't seem to be too phased by price fluctuations, at least right now.
And it's a bit hard to attack. It's a graveyard combo, but it also just a great value engine, and you have to kind of deal with both or win over the top.
Absolutely, yeah. And one piece of interaction usually isn't enough to stop it. You need to have two.
Yep.
Next up, I think we've got another very solidly high tier, in my opinion, top tier deck. Rhinos, Crashing Footfalls, cascade into 2/4/4 Rhinos, or play a strong Planeswalker, initiative threats. It's now playing a really strong tempo game plan with RuneScape, Stormbrood, Fury, and Mystical Disputes. I think that build is really good. Rhinos is getting hit by price raises on stuff like Spirit Guides, on its good Planeswalkers like Minskin Boo or Arlen Cord, Oko, but I've played against it twice this week, and the deck is just still incredibly strong.
Yeah, I think when people think about value vintage, this is the boogeyman of the format. I think, rightly so, deserves a spot there in the S tier. But like you said, it is getting a bit more expensive. They're usually not running the full 8 spirit guides anymore.
No,
If
yeah,
they have
that's
to drop
impossible.
much further, that I think that hurts it quite a bit. So we'll have to see on that one.
Absolutely, but I think as of right now, even with the prices the way it is, I mean, it's still just such an incredibly tough deck to contest for a lot of decks,
Oh,
especially anything
absolutely.
else fair that's trying to win on the battlefield. Next up, Hogak, also changing than how it used to be. It doesn't have access to Cabal Therapy anymore. Golgari Hogak Roots lists that used to be very popular are appearing a little bit less and less in favor of mono black smallbox type lists. It is susceptible to graveyard hate and board wipes and even one for one removal. I still think that I would call this somewhere mid to high A tier personally.
Yeah, I think the mono black version of Hogak has really impressed me. I didn't like the green black one as much. But the mono black one that I played against more recently, I think is really strong. So happy with
Yeah,
it in A there.
definitely. I don't think it's losing anything, losing the green splash. Like the small dudes in black are really strong. I like the new addition of Luen from Lorwyn to fix your draws and sort of be a Satyr Wayfinder effect that doesn't need green mana.
Hmm.
Next up, High Tide. This has pretty much always been a pillar of the format. I am noticing that it has a few less entrants lately when people are not ready for this deck, or even sometimes when they are. It's handedly one of the best combo style decks in the format. It is not too easy to interact with. It can also play a pretty good control plan until it's ready to combo. Probably low S to high A for me.
Yeah, doesn't have a lot of results. I think part of that's just it is a difficult deck to play. You do need your reps with this one to understand all the different bits of it.
Absolutely.
Obviously, you've got High Tide, which is just one blue, double all of your mana, and then you've got all these cards that let you untap your lands. So when you do, they actually make mana because then they make two. But you got to be able to understand how to pull that all together and in order to win.
I also think people just kind of don't feel a need to prove it. Like it's been around for so long, everyone knows it's
Hmm.
good, and it's just not maybe the most interesting thing to play, but I don't think it's lost any power.
No.
Next up, Goblins. This has technically been around, but just recently it's seen a lot more brewing done around it, and I think it still has a good bit of room for improvement. It's turning into more of like a mid-range to control grindy game plan where you play, in your threat slots. You've got 8 removal spells as well as one sort of Thoughtseize effect with Taster of Wares, and it's kind of looping between those with Grub and Chthonian Nightmare. So once you can get to the mid game, it's got a really strong grind engine. I just think it is currently not the top option for a creature-based control mid-range, and there isn't really a set 75 that's been hammered out. So while I do think this is a cool deck and it could raise with more people piloting it, I'd say right now this is going to be like high D, low C for me.
I like this deck a lot a couple months ago. It's gone up tremendously then. I think my list is over $40
Oh
now.
wow, yeah.
Which isn't great. It's Conspicuous Snoop and Goblin Recruiter have both gone up. Kiki Jiki. I was playing the Kiki combo in there, and that has gone up a bit too. That was
Oh
always
yeah,
crazy
Kiki's
expensive. It
nearly
was like eight
$10 at this
dollars,
point.
but it's
Yeah.
like yeah, it's like $10 now. If you don't know this combo, it's just Goblin Recruiter. You play that on turn two, then you can stack the next three cards of Conspicuous Snoop, Torch Courier, Kiki Jiki. That lets you draw, play a land, play Conspicuous Snoop, play Torch Courier from your top. You target Conspicuous Snoop with Courier. That lets you copy the Kiki Jiki now that's on top of your library as many times as you want, and then you target the Goblin Recruiter, and that lets you put something like Mog Mob on top. That lets you take all of those copies you made and flip out your opponent to win. But this version of the deck that I was playing just isn't viable anymore
No.
because of the cost. Now there are other versions of it. A lot of them splash black um, that are interesting. I think there is brewing space there, but it
Definitely.
has gotten harder.
Yeah, and that comes with, having a Goblin focus set with Lorwyn come out. People are really excited to play Goblins in Modern, in
Hmm.
Commander. Some of the old staples are going up in price, but in exchange, it
Hmm.
also gets some new tools. Next up, Channel Mirror, also one of the most well-established combo decks of Value Vintage. It is really, like High Tide, a very high synergy, interestingly constructed deck built around resolving a channel where you can pay life to make colorless mana and then Lich's Mirror that resets your life to 20 and draws you a fresh 7 cards whenever your life total hits 0. This has also put up a decent bit of results recently. I know it won a 1K, but Mirror itself is presently bugged in MTGO, so it doesn't see as much entries or practice in that world. So it's not necessarily as represented as I think it is good. As of right now, I would say that this is also still an S tier deck in my opinion.
Yeah, this one's really good. I've never actually played against it because I only play on Magic Online. And like we just said, the Lich's Mirror key card in the deck is bugged on there. It does this very consistently on turn one and turn two. It's a
Oh
very
yeah.
cool deck to look at
Mm-hmm.
if you want to have a browse at some point.
And then Pyrehumans, I guess it makes sense to put these together. Pyre Heroes is a birthing pod for creatures that share a creature type that is also currently bugged on Magic Online, so it is seeing less representation and less practice, but it's still putting up decent results on paper. It is sort of like a mid-range toolboxy deck. A lot of people seem to view it as the de facto best fair creature mid-range deck. I would call this like a high A tier deck.
Yeah, it's got some good results in paper, but like you said, you can't play it on Magic Online right now.
Yeah. Next up, Infect. That is one of your classic, math aggro combo decks. Has had a little bit less results recently, but I think it easily still has the results to grab games. It can be one of the fastest decks in the format, and there's a lot of different ways to build it to maintain the budget. I just think it's seeing a little bit less entries, but the strength is still there. I would personally call this like a high B tier deck.
Yeah, it's got a bit of an issue if you're playing against someone with a bunch of one and two drop creatures plus removal, it can really struggle.
Absolutely, if you
So it's a
can buy
bit
that
meta
time.
dependent. Yeah, it's a bit meta dependent, but if you're in the right meta, it can be extremely strong.
Yeah. This is also definitely one of those things where, yeah, if you can dodge certain matchups or if people aren't necessarily expecting it, that's when it's going to shine the most.
Hmm.
And then Eldrazi Stompy, it wouldn't be my go-to for like a Stompy aggro deck. I think that this is probably like a D tier deck right now, but if it had some more dedicated pilots and brewing, it could go up.
Yeah, there's another Eldrazi deck on where our list will visit in a little bit
Yeah,
that's a
that I
little
would
stronger.
consider much better. And then Dredge. Dredge doesn't not get entered a ton these days. But man, when it pops off, I mean, it's sort of similar to Hogak and Infect, where it's one of those decks that shines the most when people aren't ready for it. It is susceptible to a lot of different types of interaction. I think if people are expecting this in their meta, it's really easy to sort of stop them in their tracks if you play responsibly and slow down your own game plan. But its ability to steal games, put on crazy pressure, is really high. And I would consider this also probably B tier, like a little bit below Infect.
Yeah, it's very strong, but there's a lot of really cheap. very good graveyard hate in value vintage that often shows up in sideboards,
Yeah, no one
and
ever
any
plays
deck
less
can
than
play
3 or
it.
4 Soul Guide or Leyline.
Yeah, so it gets hurt a little bit from there, but obviously it's still very powerful.
Definitely. And then Merfolk. So Merfolk is a really interesting list. It does have a few dedicated pilots. It's got a couple of different compositions. Some play like a more fair, curve out, Voldalian Hexcatcher, sometimes Aether Vial route, a bunch of counter spells, and some removal tacked onto their creatures. Some play the build with opposition, where you tap down your creatures, you make extra tokens to tap down your opponent's board. Sometimes they play a fair value Nadu in the deck as well. I think both of those are decent, but there's not a ton of entries, and there's not really like one set 75 for the list yet. But what I like about Merfolk is that I think it's pretty well positioned against all the decks that are going to end up in S tier. It just is a little bit weaker on a lot of the things below it, like other creature based decks, specifically, things that have access to Fury, things that don't need to play to the stack as hard. And it's also just, I don't think it's a solid deck. But I think Merfolk would be a great entry point to the format because it is good against a lot of the best decks. It makes for fun, interactive games, but it also is just, a classic archetype, a monocolor or two color creature based deck. I would call this like top of C tier with potential to improve.
I think this Murpho is really interesting because it's a kind of a mid-range creature deck, but it's really good interacting on the stack. You've got cards like Curse Catcher. I think Bodalian Hexcatcher is the other one. Is that the
Yeah,
Lord
the
that
one
lets
that you
you?
can sack any Merfolk to counter a spell
Yeah,
unless its
to
controller pays one.
yeah. So you're able to interact with the decks like Rhinos and a deck like Channel Mirror while just playing out your creatures. Some of those top decks there, and that's really strong.
Yeah, not
A lot
having to
of decks
dedicate
can't.
any slots to interaction because your interaction is also your threats and your
Hmm.
synergy and your win con.
Yeah. A lot of the, top decks there, like you can see High Tide, Channel Mirror, Rhinos, they're playing on the stack a lot, and Merfolk being able to do that as well is nice.
Absolutely. And with that in mind, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, talk about Eldrazi Post because we have addressed it in regards to a couple of these other decks. ePost has had some incredible results lately. Friend of the channel, my first co-host, Secular Sam, just continues to sweep after sweep, 3-0, 4-0 on this deck. Other pilots are picking it up and getting crazy results as well. I think ePost is easily like our number 3 deck in the format, approximately. Maybe, in a couple weeks it could even be higher. But I think Epost is probably the best control deck in the format, the best big mana deck. And one reason that I also am thinking that Merfolk deserves a better look is because it has the land hate built into it as well. With Epos being a top 3 deck in the format, Merfolk having an interesting angle of attack for all 3 of these decks, that's why this is worth a better look for me.
Yeah, Eldrazi Post has, especially in Sam's hands there, had a really strong showing the last month or so. Cloud Post is a heck of a card.
Absolutely.
Um,
And we've got Hollow One or Looting. We've got some mono red builds of this, some Is It. The Is It Looting list that doesn't play Hollow Ones itself, that is my main deck. I haven't played it on the channel yet, but I probably will soon. I think this is, in my opinion, probably the best full aggro or combo math style aggro deck in the format. It does have a little bit of fragility, but it also has some good reach because you have tools that can play from the graveyard. It can be explosively fast with pretty easy turn 3 wins. Pretty much 100% of the time can push on turn 4, and it can play through the first few pieces of counter magic or removal. So I would call this also pretty high on the A tier.
yeah, that's a really strong deck. I've always been impressed with this one. I play against it. See a turn one marauding Mako or something out there. It's scary. If you haven't played against this one, it can go from, you know, not very threatening to killing you very, very
Oh,
quickly.
absolutely, yeah. Especially with Hobgoblin now, the first creature that gets 2 power buff rather than 1 when you discard a card, that can easily get itself up
Hmm.
to 17 power in one go. Then Fluctuator,
Yeah.
Cycle Storm, built around resolving a Fluctuator, and then 55 out of 60 cards in your deck will cycle for free, winning with Marauding Mako or Drannith Stinger. This also continues to put up consistent results. We've got now a few new pilots picking it up after the success that Dude has shown on it. It is sometimes a little bit fragile, but it does have a couple of pretty interesting ways to bounce back from being interacted with, or different ways to put pressure on the board. And I think this is, just a really strong deck. I would call it high tier. I'd call it a little bit above Hogak.
Yeah, this is another one that's I think very cool. You do need to find fluctuator for the most part in order to have some of the crazy hands, but when you do, it's very strong.
Absolutely. Then oops, all spells. So this one does not see a lot of play right now. This is largely due to price changes. Dark Ritual was a really important card in this archetype. I still think Oops and to a slightly lesser extent Belcher are decks that could exist in the format. It is still a really strong combo deck that is a little bit tougher to interact with. It also you can't win off just one piece of interaction, but it is missing the speed that it used to have, and it's also just for that reason having seeing less pilots playing it consistently. So right now, I would probably say that this is somewhere around the D tier.
Yeah, the dark rituals have gone up in price a lot recently, and the decks that really relied on that for speed have certainly been hurt.
Yeah, it's definitely suffering for it. Now, on the note of pre-modern price raises, I know this is a deck that you used to like as well. Oath of Druids has pretty much
Hmm.
all but fallen off the face of value vintage. I think it could still exist, but it's going to need to adapt a lot with Oath itself now costing over $4 per one copy, and the deck building restrictions and sacrifices it takes to play it. I think right now, unfortunately, this is probably an F tier deck.
It's it's an interesting one. This is one of the ones I've actually played the most. Well, my build's not important for this discussion because it's kind of off the wall.
Yeah, you play it cool. You
But
do.
in general, the pre-modern has really hurt this deck. Oath's a very good deck in pre-modern. You play it with Terravor in there, and that lets you mill into Terravor and all the lands to your graveyard, and Terravor gets huge.
Yeah,
So with the pre-modern spike, that's people are buying copies of Oath of Druids in real life, including myself actually a couple weeks ago. I think you can build it down to three. I think there's like other ways you can build this deck. I was thinking about. I haven't actually pulled the trigger on it yet, but like a Pyroglyph Oath deck
oh, absolutely.
in
Yeah,
normal expensive vintage, you can play Pyroglyph Oath, which sometimes doesn't even run all four Oath of Druids anyway. Just it could obviously in normal vintage, but it just doesn't. And then you play like Planeswalkers as well. It's kind of like a control deck. So you could play kind of like a an Oath control deck with Pyroglyphs and burn spells. I think in value vintage, I think there's a lot of room to play with Oath, but I think the versions that are tried and tested and have done well are pretty much dead because they're
yeah,
priced out.
absolutely. Then we've got the Convoke and 8 whack style decks. Now, technically, these are two archetypes, but they do play almost identically. 8 whack is mono red, built around putting a lot of dudes in play and then buffing them with a bushwhacker effect, whereas the Convoke list plays white red and uses its tokens to convoke out a big 5 drop like Venerated Loxodon or Knight Errant of Eos. They both have a little bit of fragility, but also a good amount of speed, and I think they are cool, definitely a fun angle for an aggro deck in this format. I would probably say it is sitting in the C tier right now.
I think this is when we got to see a screenshot of it in action to really appreciate it. You just look at this deck list, at least for me at first glance, I didn't get it, but then I'm seeing some screenshots, I get it.
Yeah, it can pop
Yeah,
off out of nowhere,
there's
and I
like these
think they're
huge boards, all these creatures everywhere. If you want to play synergy decks, Value Vintage is a great place for synergy decks in 2026, and this is a good example.
absolutely. And then spirits. Normally, their build of spirits is going to be a mono blue sort of tempo control style deck. The pressure's in the air. There is also some Azorius builds, or at least there used to be. Spirits in general is seeing a bit less play than it used to. I think there was a time last year that it was viewed as the strongest deck in the format, and it still has most of those same tools available. It's just seeing a little bit less play, but I still think this is a really strong angle. Right now, I would put it in the B tier, probably above Dredge. But I'd be curious to see if both these decks have some more brewing innovation and testing how Spirits and Merfolk compare, because I don't think they're that far apart.
Spirit's another one like Merfolk where it gets to play on the stack. It's spell queller is the counterspell spirit, right?
Yeah.
And it's just being able to play on this stack is so nice.
And then Blue Post, our other Cloud Post big mana deck. This one is a little bit more control style, gets access to a lot of really potent recursive counter spells due to its excess of mana, as well as some unique tools to close the game. Sometimes Mindslaver Lock, sometimes just a big colorless threat, sometimes the Thopter Sword combo. I think this is pretty solidly positioned. I would consider it a little bit weaker than the Eldrazi variant, but probably somewhere top of B. Green White Initiative was another deck that used to be really highly positioned in the meta last year. Then when I started to get back into the format, I realized I don't see it very much. But there is one new version of it kicking around that uses the Devoted Druid Infinite Mana combo and looping initiative creatures. The biggest change is just that it no longer has access to Collected Companying into White Plume Adventurer, with White Plume Adventure steadily ticking up in price. That is a major blow, but I still think this is a strong, interactive mid-range style deck that does still have potent threats. And right now, I would call it most likely C tier.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I have never experienced the collected company into white plume version of the deck, and I'm okay with that. It sounds
Yeah,
very scary, but the new versions sound pretty cool too.
yeah. I'm still very high on Anointed Peacekeeper and Elite Spellbinder as tempo threats,
Hmm.
and any deck that has access to that is going to be a good way of bringing a creature style deck to the format and surviving these strong combo lists. This one just currently isn't putting up the craziest results. And then Creative Technique, also not seeing a ton of play, but it does have access to a new tool that I think is going to be incredibly strong. This is very similar to its legacy counterpart, sometimes referred to as Mississippi River, where you cast a Creative Technique. It lets you flip off the top of your deck until you hit any spell and cast it for free. Then everything else in your deck has Cascade, so you put a whole bunch of power on the board, ending with a Maelstrom Wanderer that's going to give all these creatures you cascade into haste and kill in one shot. It doesn't lose to one counterspell, is one of its biggest strengths, but its sort of cascade spell, rather than costing 3, costs 5. So it needs to play a bit more fragile of a mana base using the double mana sacrifice lands. But I think this deck is still incredibly potent and just needs to have a few more people piloting it to put up the results that I bet it can. I think this is B tier right now, maybe a little room to improve.
I think this one's especially interesting on Magic Online where you can't play Channel Mirror. It's doing not the same thing, but it's in kind of the same space, I think,
Absolutely.
as the Channel Mirror deck. But obviously has the advantage of being legal on Magic Online.
Oh yeah, this unlike the other Cascade decks, aside from Channel Mirror, it does all win same turn, and it's pretty consistent in doing
Hmm.
so. You can't stop it with just one piece. Next up, Boros Energy. This is one of the most popular decks in the format, and I know I've said this about several decks, but price changes. Guide of Souls is steadily ticking up, but Boros Energy still sees some consistent entrance and decent results. There are also some variants being brewed with Jeskai, Mardu. I don't think that this is the strongest, mid-range or aggro deck right now. I don't think it's weak, but the price changes are hurting it. I think there is not really a locked 75 for this list either, and it has some really rough matchups. Like, I know whenever I play against this on allies, I just don't feel threatened by it. Even if the games are close, there's just so many ways to interact with it, and it isn't that interactive back. Like, it can remove creatures, but not a lot else. So at this
Yeah,
time, I would say somewhere around here in the B tier.
yeah, Guide of Souls being, I think, more than half your budget at this point makes the rest of the deck tough to build out. And there are powerful cards you can put in there, like there are cards like Amped Raptor, which are extremely cheap. But it's certainly more difficult now.
Yeah. Indomitable Creativity next. Another one of many ways to cheat creatures into play. Creativity is built a little bit differently than how it was in Modern. On Modern, it was just a turn 4 combo. You go X's 1, stick an Archon of Cruelty into play, and we don't quite have access to that in Value Vintage. Most of the time, they're going on X's 2 and putting in 2 creatures at once that win the game together, such as 2 copies of Pyroglyph that generates 4 ETBs in one shots, or like a World Spine Worm and some ability to grant haste. Creativity has got a couple people brewing it. It's got definitely a strong control angle and a fairly consistent combo finish, just not a lot of entrance, but a ton of potential. I think this is around the B tier.
Yeah, this was a big player in Modern for a while. It's definitely powerful. Just probably needs a few more pilots.
Restore Balance. This is an interesting one. This is another Cascade deck, but rather than cascading into a win con, it cascades into sort of a control piece. It plays Balance itself and 4 Restore Balances, with several ways to take your own lands off the battlefield and very small amount of creatures. So when you resolve a balance, you're going to remove your opponent's lands and wipe their board of all their creatures. Sometimes discard some of their hand as well. This uses border posts. Volatile Fault is some new tech that's been really impressive. And then once it gets to resolve one balance, sometimes it even does it twice. It just grinds out the game with some counter spells and planeswalkers as their value engine. I think right now, this may be a bit controversial. I think this is actually the third best Cascade variant. I think this has recently overtaken Hypergenesis and Living End.
Interesting. I really do like this deck. There's a player on Magic Online in the practice room I've played against a number of times who loves this deck, so I've played against it quite a lot. It's a very unique value vintage experience between getting to play actual factual restricted balance, restricted in normal vintage balance, and then the four extra copies. It's just a very unique, very cool experience there. I recommend it, and it is very powerful. Um, I'm not sure if it's better than Living In. I'd probably put Living End higher, but it's a cool one. We'll get to that when
Yeah,
we get to
that's
Living
one we're
End
going to
because
have to
Living
debate
End
when
has
we
some
get there.
problems right now.
Oh, absolutely,
Hmm.
yeah. And we both have played Living End a lot, so that's one that's in a really interesting position in the meta. But we'll get there when we get there. Next up,
Hmm.
Prowess. Prowess is another one of those sort of high synergy aggro combo builds, similar to Infect. At the end of the day, people just aren't registering it. I'm really like, I wouldn't be thrilled to register it at an event, even though this was my main deck in Modern for years. I think right now,
How does
unfortunately,
this
it
one
is an
differ
F2 deck.
to Burn?
So it more plays to the board, like rather than, just creatures that are good on their own. Obviously, they both play Swift Spear, but like Burn will play, Goblin Guide and Eidolon. Prowess
Hmm.
wants to sort of storm off. It's going to play stuff like the Mice from Bloomburrow or old Prowess
Oh, okay,
threats like
okay.
Soulscar Mage, and then use some impulse draw things or some buff spells. It's going to focus on keeping 1 to 2 threats in play and winning off those rather than damage straight to face. So that means that unlike Burn, it is weaker to removal. I think that's definitely one weak suit, and some of the best Prowess threats, like the Emberheart Challenger, take up a big chunk of the budget.
Uh-huh. Got it. Want to just skip to Burn since we this one's pretty
Yeah,
similar?
absolutely. So Burn, and I'm including Red Deck wins here as well because while they are built slightly differently, at the end of the day, they're playing on the same axis. They're all using cheap, efficient threats like Goblin Guide. They're using burn spells, and they're just trying to count to 20 as quick as possible. Both variants of this have put up results recently. It is also a really easy deck to pilot, especially if you're new to the format, and I think
Yeah.
that this is
Um.
pretty easily somewhere in the A tier for me.
Yeah, I agree. It's also a good deck to get into the format. What you're trying to do is pretty much the same every game. So it's a nice way just to learn the format.
Yeah,
And it's very strong.
and yeah, it really does still maintain that strength. So Dark Depths. Dark Depths is used to be maybe just even 1 month or 2 months ago was absolutely a force in the format. It was something you had to be ready for. You had to have a out to a Merit Lodge in your sideboard at least because a lot of decks just wouldn't be ready for it. But man, Dark Depths has seems to have completely fallen off in terms of its entrance. There are still a few different things to do with the card, and obviously 2020 Flying Indestructible will win games. But people just seem to have kind of stopped developing the list, or at least stopped entering events with it. I think a lot of that is due to pricing. And right now, I mean, I don't see a ton of reason to put it higher than the D tier.
Yeah, Depths is an interesting one. The power is obviously there. I mean, Thespian, Stage, Hexmage, and Depths are all affordable in the format. I'm not entirely sure why it's fallen off so much. I did play it once, and it seemed, pretty reasonable. I still think it's pretty decent, but yeah, it hasn't had any results recently, really.
No, there is a ton of room for this to go up, though. I think if we see a few more people enter with it, brew with it, I could easily see it being placed higher. But as of right now, that's kind of how I'm viewing it.
Hmm.
And Hypergenesis, another Cascade variant. This one cascades into Hypergenesis, which is the suspend version of Eureka. So rather than say Footfalls that just needs to be in your deck, or Living End that needs to put threats into the graveyard, Hypergenesis wins by putting all the big fatties that you've drawn into your hand straight into play. So it plays a lot of things that are also removal when they enter because your opponent also gets to put things in for free. This is faster than something like Living End or Rhinos. It goes all in on Spirit Guides and double mana sack lands, trying to cast its Genesis on turn 2, but for that reason, it is also really fragile. If your Genesis gets countered, it kind of just folds. It doesn't have the ability to re-roll that. And I think it is just not getting entered as much as it used to. Like a good friend of mine, Dan, used to consistently enter events and put up great results with this deck, but he's all but given up on it right now. I still don't think it's bad, but I would call it probably low C or high D.
You're trying to jam very quickly. The Spirit Guys going up in price is a big deal.
Delver. So mono blue, or is it or Demir, tempo style, classic Legacy Delver or modern Murktide. A lot of people doing some spins on this. Some are getting okay results. But at the end of the day, I just don't think that we have a great or a solved tempo deck in the format yet. All these Delver builds are so different from one another, and none are really like consistently sweeping up events. I think this is one that could easily shoot up, but for right now, I think this is probably like bottom of C or high D.
Yeah, I think this one suffers a lot. This is a powerhouse in a lot of other formats, but no days, no force of will, no force of negation. It's
No
it's very hard
wasteland.
to just play. Yeah, no wasteland. It's very hard just to play like a one mana, efficient creature and ride it to victory in this format. I think Merfolk and Spirits do this kind of thing better right now.
Absolutely. Now, Reanimator. This is the classic one for one, put one fat dude in the graveyard and bring it back. Our reanimation options aren't bad. They're generally persist and life death, sometimes a couple copies of Emperor Bones, but those are very expensive. And the big threats of choice are often going to be Troll of Khazad-dûn, sometimes Sire of Insanity, or Waker of Waves. I think it's fine. This is an archetype that exists in some form or another in every format, and it can easily grab some games. It is obviously susceptible to one for one removal like Swords to Plowshares, as well as Graveyard Hate, as well as counter spells, which is a lot of angles that you can be fought on. But I think that it has the tools needed to win games. I think that with more pilots or a little bit more innovation, it could go up. But even now, I would probably call this somewhere in the B tier.
You can play this black blue or black red. There are different people trying different versions of it. You can make it very all in combo, or you can play kind of like a mid rangey deck with it, with like reanimator sort of value things like reanimating Troll of Khazad-dûm and other kind of like creatures that aren't solely needed for the reanimation package, like Troll fetches a land, that kind of thing. Or Fury, you can evoke a Fury, which is cheaper now, and
Yeah,
reanimate it.
the
There's
Waker of
different things
Waves
you
also
can.
puts itself in the yard. I think that's one that needs to get tried a little more.
Yeah, I think, the versions that are just trying to put like Terastodon or something into play, I don't think are that great.
No.
But I think if there's, innovation within the middle space there, and there's a lot of enablers. You've got like Grand now, Frantic Search in blue.
Yeah,
In red, you've got Faithless Looting, and there's some, black cards like Collective Brutality. Like the tools are there. So
totally.
it is something you want to play, it's fine, but it's not, the best thing in the world either.
It's a little middle of the road right now, at least.
Yeah.
Miracles is our next flavor of blue-white control. I think a lot of people would consider this the best variant. We've got, one or two dedicated pilots putting up really consistent results with it, innovating on it, figuring out what is the best interaction, what is the best threat suite. My friend Santi has got a really good primer about how he keeps the deck up to date. It does have a couple of rougher matchups. I think if you can get your feet under you fast enough and Miracles doesn't have the right interaction or doesn't draw well enough, you can steal some games from it. But it also can contest pretty much any other deck in the format, assuming things line up well. To me, this is probably A tier. I'm going to put it right below Hogak because Santi on Miracles can seemingly never win the Hogak matchup.
I think Miracles is a really interesting one. I think it's a very hard deck to play. You're entirely, most of the deck's reactive. So like you need format knowledge to know when to cast your spells, what to remove, etc., etc. And you need like a good amount of patience. You're playing longer games here. It has put up some really good results the last, I think 3-4 months when I've been playing Value Vintage.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one that I really respect, but it doesn't have a ton of pilots. But the ones that are really focused on are doing well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Bard class. This is also one that has only got a couple of pilots on it, but some of those pilots are putting up great results, and we have access to a lot of tools that the Pioneer deck doesn't. I think that this is one that just needs a little bit more development. Got to take it to some bigger events, try it in different matchups, try out some different potential, backup plans for when you're not doing your Bard class, Ruby, Ben Riley, Stormoff plan. But even as it is now, I think it's really decent. I just need to see it a little bit more. I would probably call this, a mid C tier deck with a lot of potential to improve. Living End. So both of us have played this deck a lot. I am really low on the deck right now, personally. I love it. I think it's really fun. It's my favorite flavor of Cascade deck, but I also think presently it's the weakest. I think what drew me to it for so long was its ability to play 4 copies of Grief. These Cascade decks need to be able to interact, especially Living End, because it's interactable itself in 2 different ways. It can both be countered or graveyard hated out. So I want
Mm-hmm.
access to Grief, I want access to counter spells, and right now prices are raising crazy on Grief. Living End itself is going up in price, Generous End is
Mm-hmm.
going up in price. You really got to pick your battles. I think that the deck is not necessarily dead, but unless some people really start toying with it and completely retooling and find a way for it to be able to contest both counterspells and graveyard hate without a full 4 copies of grief, I have it I have it D tier. That's what I'm thinking. But I know you're gonna feel differently, so let me hear your case.
I do have it a bit higher. Not being able to play four grief is really bad. I won't undersell that. And when I played it a couple weeks ago, I had three griefs. I think you had three griefs as
I
well.
was also on three
I had
griefs,
the
and that was okay. But even
yeah.
that build is about $37 now.
Oh really? Yeah. So it's got some money issues there, for sure. I'd have to look at I guess a current price to take a look at it. But just a couple weeks ago, it did still feel good. If some of the things have gone up since then, I do think that going down the D tier probably makes sense.
Yeah,
Grief's probably the strongest card in the deck,
I would
so that's
agree.
kind of a problem.
And I think it could go up easily. If we see a couple prices go down or just some
Hmm.
people change and iterate how to build on it, like I am slowly starting to look at a Jund build, which unfortunately it misses out on the counter spells, but there are a
Hmm.
couple other discard spells that are cascade friendly that could maybe make up for needing to trim on griefs. And then, cheaper mana as well enables you to still maybe at least play 2, hopefully 3 copies of grief. I think it could go up, but right now it's just having a rough go of it. And until some people change what the deck is,
Hmm.
it's just yeah, it's feeling a little bit low tier.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. There's a bunch of different ways to build it. If you look at, living end lists that have done well the last few months, they're all very different. Even like the colors, like mine was rug,
Hmm.
and not everybody's, is rug. Some people play different colors of,
Yeah,
the living end deck. But you can play, I think the decks, I- you can play versions of living end that you can actually play your creatures. Like some of them that you cycle cost like 3 and 4 mana, and you can just hard cast them
this
against
is true.
someone
Yeah.
mulling to like graveyard hit and stuff. I won like a couple of games just like playing 4 mana 4/4 flyers and turning them sideways because my opponent mulled to a ley line. Like
Exactly.
you
Yeah, if
can
you're
use
keeping a bad hand because it has graveyard hate, and then you just play fair, that is a cool way to steal some games.
yeah. So it's got room there. It's very powerful, but the price is hurt for sure.
Absolutely. Now, Naya Boom, this is a deck that is definitely unique to Value Vintage. There's nothing quite like this that exists in other decks. So this is a mid-range deck, built around resolving 1 to 2 really big threats, whether it is a Planeswalker like a Minskin Boo, an initiative threat, a card advantage like Lelia or Synth Eradicator. It ramps them out using land destruction spells on your indestructible lands like Boom Bust or Cleansing Wildfire. So it built in has pretty good tech against Eldrazi Post. That's important.
Hmm.
Looking at the list, it doesn't look like it should be that good. And I don't think it's a solved list. But man, just off 2 dedicated pilots, it puts up result after result. Everyone I talk to about this views it as a high to top tier deck. I think right now, most likely, it's got to be probably top of A.
It's doing a bunch of powerful things and it's cheating on mana. Like if you're getting a quick Minskin Boo, or blowing up your opponent's lands, off of the cascading very quickly, it's very powerful and it's got some resilience too. What's the card that lets? There's a card advantage card in the deck that I can't remember the name of, like a red.
I know
Uh,
Synth Eradicator sees a lot of play.
Synth Eradicator. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's got a lot of tools to it. It can, slam a quick Minskin Boo. It's got
Yeah.
resilience. It's doing some unfair things with the boom part of the deck. It is very cool and impressed me when I played against it.
Yeah, and it plays heavy on removal and happens to have incidental land hate, so its matchup against Breakfast and E-Post is
Hmm.
inherently good. So, a lot of credit for that. B Infinity. So I don't have regular Affinity on the tier list right now because it isn't having a lot of entrants, though I do think with all the new tools it's getting from the new set, that could definitely change. The Beanstalk variant is also ticking up in price, but I still think it's really strong. It's putting up results most weeks. I think this is a really fun, almost combo style, but definitely still aggro, definitely still plays fair. Uh, I think I would call this mid on the A tier.
Just to point out here, the beans one was doing really well for a while, like blue-green affinity, but you can play other colors, and some of them are a bit cheaper now because beans has actually itself gone up,
Yeah.
making the blue-green one have to make some difficult choices. But you can play blue-red, and we've got that new card coming out in Turtles. That's kind of what we talked about earlier in the video. That's basically a new creative plane. That's what I was trying to think of. I think there's, definitely room to play here. The actual affinity cards and the mechanic is very strong in the
Yeah.
set,
And cheap.
in the format, and it's cheap.
So yeah, just a lot of room to brew here, but even this classic blue-green beanstalk build, still really strong.
Hmm. Exactly.
Arclight Phoenix. This was my first deck in the format a little over a year ago, and man, it has fallen. Even back then, it was a little bit of a fragile deck, right? It can
Hmm.
really quick put a lot of flying power into play. It does have access to good tempo. Every sideboard card I feel like that you put in your sideboard is incidentally good against Arclight Phoenix, and there are so many other strong things you can be doing in the blue-red X Spellslinger style deck where I think Phoenix it could be better if more pilots pick it up, change the list a little. I don't think it's unviable, but I think right now it is on the weaker side. I think it's like low D until we see some more results with it.
Yeah, I think it's a cool deck. I haven't been super impressed with it either in Value Vintage. You open yourself up to graveyard hate, which isn't the end of the world, but it is certainly a weakness.
Next up is Golgari midrange, whether it is the sort of rock builds that are more built like classic Jund or the initiative builds. Either way, acceleration, one for one trades, and hyper efficient threats. Removal, hand hate, and graveyard hate, all available, as well as some good grind engines like Grist and Scavenging Ooze. I think this is handedly one of the best ways to be doing a fair mid-range deck in the format because it's good at bridging the gap for the first few turns against combo. It has gotten, I think, two trophies recently on different variants of it. I think this is definitely like a good, fair deck, would be a great entry point into the format, and is probably going to be somewhere around here in the A tier.
Yeah, having the discard there, like Inquisition of Kozilek and Duress, can really shore up a lot of the, not shore up, but, give you good tools to fight some of the combo matchups, which is important. And then, greens and black have some of the best standalone threats there. So I do like this one as well.
Hmm. And Boggles does not see a ton of play right now. But it's a fun deck. A lot of the core of the deck, stick a hexproof creature in play and then a bunch of cheap auras, try to count to 20. It is sort of a math style aggro deck like Prowess, Hardened Scales, Infect. I would call it, I think it's just so similar to Prowess. I think it might be a hair better than Prowess right now because the threats it wants to play are cheap. You can spend your budget a little bit differently, where this deck has really good mana. But it also just doesn't see a lot of entrance. It does have some weak spots.
I didn't even know this was a value vintage deck.
Fair. It's mostly known as like a fringe modern deck, and it is fringe and value vintage too, but it's got potential.
Fair enough.
Now, so allies. This is obviously my baby. If you saw my video last week, allies, I brought this over to the format from based off of Aspiring Spike's modern build, and it just continues to impress. I thought it was going to be sort of like a meme, Brewer's Advantage deck. I would get a couple of wins because people weren't ready for it. And then I bring it back and I get more wins. Then other people pick up the deck and they get wins. This deck is just so unique in that it can play aggro, or it can play combo, or it can play control. It can have a game go to time because it's gained 400 life. It's good against aggro because it has all this life gain. It is resilient because even if your mass reanimate gets graveyard hated out or countered, you can still put pressure on the board. I think right now it's well positioned. I think this is an A tier deck.
Was really impressed with this one when I saw it in action. The combo with the Helmar excavator. Do I have that right?
Yep. Yeah, the mass mill ally.
Yeah, let you mill yourself, put your allies into the yard, then there's two cards in the deck that let you bring them back and they all check each other at the same time on the ETB triggers, which can do some very silly things. I think it's a lot better. If you look at it on paper, you might not realize the power of it, but when you see it in action, it's very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, Rakos Luris used to be a little bit more of a pillar of the format. Right now, not a ton of results, but there is a lot of ways to build it. It's a cool, grindy engine. There's a lot of interesting things that you can do, and it can have good matchups, but it just doesn't seem to be people's flavor of choice for, fair mid-range control. I think right now this is probably somewhere in the C tier.
Yeah, Luris is in an interesting space. It's an extremely strong card, banned in Legacy, and it's still very good in Value Vintage. We don't have like the mocks in the cards to cheat it out really, so the actual tax on it's tough. So you're playing this on turn 4 or 5 to try and get value. If you can live to that long, Luris can just with its advantages, replaying something from the yard for value every turn, take over a match. But it does seem like we don't have a build that's being able to bridge that gap, get there consistently, and do that right now. But it's
No.
definitely interesting space. I think it's one that I want to try it soon.
Yeah, I did just play a build that was this built around like a more sacrifice engine now that Goblin Bombardment
Hmm.
has dropped in price, also using Smallpox and Numidian Hatchery, and I lost 2 matches to Rhinos. That was really it. Uh,
Yeah,
but there's room there. Sharkstill has gotten a couple of great results recently. This is just another flavor of blue-white control, but a really good one. I think this is probably our next best blue-white control variant after the Miracles build.
makes sense to me.
Gates does not see a lot of play these days. It is a really cool, unique build. Like, I don't think this could exist in any other format. Not a ton of people entering it, but I don't think it's bad. I think right now it's probably like in the D tier, definitely able to win games, put up results, and if some more people iterate on the deck and play it, it could go higher.
Sounds good.
And then Thopter Sword, I think it's a good top end grind engine for the control decks, but it's also just not the flavor of choice for a lot of people. It's not getting played a ton, but I think it's pretty all right. I would call this like somewhere in the C tier. This is probably one of the control variants that I would be most excited to tinker with and play myself.
It's an interesting one. I think it's a little clunky. It's a little hard to assemble the combo when some of your opponents are doing something just like turn two rhinos every game.
Yeah,
But it's it's an interesting space, and the combo has a proven track record.
of course, yeah. And then Azorius Bane got another control deck. This one has top end of Sailor's Bane and sometimes Aligned Heart and Monastery Mentor. I think it plays a similar game to Miracles, just rather than playing with top deck manipulation, it just has a lot harder card advantage and then really punchy threats to, once it does have control of the game, close it out a little quicker. I don't think it's weak at all. I think not a lot of people are entering it, but I've seen some lists of it that look incredibly strong. I think it's going to be like somewhere around here for me, somewhere in the B tier.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a more friendly version of a control deck to play than Miracles, but I do think Miracles, if you're willing to put in the time to learn it, is stronger.
Would have the edge. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And then abs and creature combo. This is a bit of a general archetype because there doesn't seem to be a consensus on what creature combo is the best or whether you're supposed to play multiple. I think, there's a ton of builds of the Pioneer Amalia combo, some Samcat, some Basking Broodscale, some Devoted Druid. Some of these play harder combo, some are more in on the mid range plan that just has a combo as a fallback. I think this one just suffers from not a lot of people picking it as their main deck or a lot of, seemingly disagreement on what the best combo and build of the deck is, but I still think it's got a lot of potential. And I mean, when this catches you off guard and has time to stick one of its combos, they do win the game on the spot. So this could probably go no lower than the bottom of C for me.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Primal Prayers, nobody's actually bringing it to events right now. Well, it requires you resolve a 4 mana enchantment and then have 2 to 3 other cards that line up perfectly to go with it. I would probably throw this in the F tier at least for now.
It's one that I think looks a bit stronger than it actually is, when you try it, fortunately.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. And Death's Shadow. I think right now it's just kind of a medium deck. I think it's just belonging somewhere in the C tier, but it does have a lot of strong tools at its disposal. If a few more people pick it up, it could easily raise.
What are some of the best ways to lower your life? I think my new card is one of them
Yeah,
that's interesting.
mine's incredibly strong. It helps your channel mirror and your high tide matchup as well. Obviously, Street
Hmm.
Wraith is available. We've got Fire Covenant, just got a reprint. That's a good boon for the Rakdos decks where you can just pay as
Okay.
much life into it as you want, wipe your opponent's board, and grow your shadow. And it has some good backup threats as well. Like I've seen one build that is mono black and also plays a couple copies of Necrodominance to control your life
Oh,
total and give you card advantage in the mid to late game. I think that build's good.
pretty cool.
Yeah, just not top tier yet at least. Wilderness Wreck is a really conflicting deck in the format. It can be frustrating to play against, but it can definitely win games. I mean, it is a when it gains control of the game, when it's able to resolve its tutor chains, extra turns, counter spells, card advantage, like capsize loops, that's kind of awesome. Also, it has some incredibly weak matchups, and the prices are fluctuating so hard on it that a lot of people
Hmm.
I've consulted about the deck view it as nigh unplayable and are putting it in the F tier. Now, I think it could go higher than that. Obviously, it does still have dedicated pilots. Yeah, Boomer Jund, great entry point into the format. This is one of those, like, people love to look back at modern decks that don't exist anymore and see, oh, can that work here? And Jund definitely can work. It is, again, just a mid range deck. It tries to trade one for one and play hyper efficient threats. So this is not a synergy deck like a lot of the format is. And it is also just definitely a blast to play, but I don't think it's nearly the strongest option available for a fair mid-range deck. I think it's on a very similar level to Green White Initiative, maybe a little bit lower because it doesn't have access to the same kind of interaction or the combo kill.
Yeah, I think it's in a similar place to Delver, where just trying to play really efficient threats and some of the best protection spells doesn't quite work out as well in Value Vintage as it does in some other formats in 2026.
Yeah.
But I think that's some of the beauty of the format as well. You're seeing, the top tiers here. We got quite a few synergy-based decks, which seem to be in the A and S tier there.
Yeah, I think that is more just the angle. We have access to such a wide, deep card pool at this point that yeah, you really want your deck to be cohesive. You want to limit your dead draws, like Bloodbraid Elf cascading
Hmm.
into an Inquisition of Kozilek. Obviously, that's an old joke. It is a feels bad, but it really is not the power level of this format right now.
Yeah, agreed.
Martyr Proc is cool. It is another bygone modern deck. It has the ability to definitely steal some matchups, similar to Allies, where if you can get your engine under you, you can gain a bunch of life. Some decks just can't kill you, but it is very interactable. Some decks, like High Tide, don't care about the life gain at all. I think there's room for improvement, but right now only a few pilots on it, and it's a fragile deck. There is kind of a reason it got power crept out of modern, despite having access to new tools. I think this is probably D for me right now.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not super impressed with this one.
No. Sailor's Beans, similar to the Infinity deck, but more of a spell slinger, a little controlling. Up the beanstalk and blue threats that get discounted equal to your instants and sorceries in yards. Really fun deck. I love how this is built. But I haven't seen anybody enter it in an event in a really long time. I think the price changes on Beanstalk, as well as just better options for control combo variants being available, have caused this to drop quite a lot. I think this is going to be down in that F tier as well right now.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then Glimpse the Impossible. This was featured also in my video last week. Jesse and I worked on Glimpse a lot with the release of Lorwyn because some of the elementals are getting cheaper. There's a lot of cool synergy there, but it really just didn't pan out. The way you need to build your deck does not line up with how the deck actually draws. The cost on your deck building restriction is, I think, just too high when the other flavors of Cascade are consistent enough and don't need to change their deck building to accommodate. I think right now this is probably the worst of the decks featured today.
It's a very cool one though. It's a very interesting deck, but yeah, it's probably not the best.
Yeah, or at least it hasn't been cracked how to build it. That's for sure.
Yeah,
All right. So yeah, this is our approximate list. As I said, this is all subject to change, and I could see a case for any of these decks being positioned differently, besides maybe the top three. So I'll include a link at the bottom for people to make their own if they want. Thank you all so much for tuning in,
if
though. Thank you,
you
Kinda,
think,
for joining me.
yeah, for sure. And if you think we missed any decks, let us know down below. I'm curious to see what you think we skipped here.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I picked 50. This is a decent representation of the meta, but the meta is still so open. It's still a pretty small community. There's probably tons of things that we haven't even started looking at yet. So really curious what else could rise up in these ranks.